This episode of The Unstarving Musician is sponsored by Liner Notes. Learn from the hundreds of musicians and industry pros I've spoken with for The Unstarving Musician on topics such as marketing, songwriting, touring, sync licensing, and much more. Sign up for Liner Notes. Liner Notes is an email newsletter from yours truly in which I share some of the best knowledge gems garnered from the many conversations featured on The Unstarving Musician. You'll also be privy to the latest podcast episodes and Liner Notes subscriber exclusives. Sign up at unstarvingmusician.com. It's free and you can unsubscribe at any time. This is The Unstarving Musician. I'm Rabanzo. This is my podcast. It features conversations with independent music artists and industry professionals with occasional special topic episodes featuring yours truly. A glimpse into the minds of my varied guests, all intended to help independent music artists better understand the marketing, business, and creative processes that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. Welcome to another episode of The Unstarving Musician. I am so happy you're here with me. Where are you? What are you wearing? What are you doing? I always want to know. Let me know. Go to the website, go to my socials, at Rabanzo Drummer. Let me know. I'm curious. This is another Rewind episode. In case you've never heard a Rewind episode, it's a previously published episode, one of my favorites, and one I think merits republishing. I also gave this episode, as with other Rewinds, a fresh edit, which means you will find it even more enjoyable from a listener perspective. And my guest on this one is Johnny Burgin, the coast-to-coast intercontinental Chicago bluesman. He first appeared on the podcast in December of 2017 in the early days. We spoke just weeks before it was the episode dropped. And that was the first time we'd met. And then in February of 2020, I met Johnny in person. I may have actually seen him play once before. We talk about this when I was in the San Francisco Bay Area. But he came to Panama with his girl partner and stayed with me and Sammy. We did a house concert there and some other shows. It was a real thrill for me. That was in February of 2020, right before you know what happened. So, wow, my first house concert, and the timing couldn't have been better or weirder. I don't know, however. But he's coming to Querétaro, where I live now in Mexico, to perform the Querétaro Blues Festival, the 9th annual. You can, let's see, Facebook. I can't do links in the show notes, but there is a Facebook page for the Querétaro Blues Festival. And gosh, I'm going to put a link there. It's not going to work, but if you go there, you'll find it. I'll give you the little @ thing. But Facebook links, I believe, are no longer supported in WordPress or something like that. We being Johnny and I, will also be doing some private shows while he's here. Oh, I get to perform with him at the Querétaro Blues Festival. How cool is that? We'll be doing some private shows and a secret show while he's here. He's going to be my house guest again. I'm really looking forward to catching up with him, hanging out with him. It's going to be fun. I have a gig tomorrow night here in Querétaro, fronting a new acoustic ensemble I call the Rabanzo Lalo Trio. It's almost sold out, so if you happen to be in town and listening to this on October 27 of 23, visit Rabanzo.com for details and reservations. And in fact, you can visit Rabanzo.com to see the Querétaro Blues gig that I'm doing with Johnny, and there will be a link there that you can follow. So I will put that link in the show notes. It's basically Rabanzo.com/shows. That'll be there for you. And you can find all my gigs there. That website, by the way, Rabanzo.com, my artist website, is powered by Bandzoogle. Supporters of this podcast, like you, dear listener, if you are looking for a website and a way to support the Unstarving Musician, if you need a website for your music, go to bandzoogle.com and use the promo code Robonzo, ROBONZO, to get 15% off your first year. Bandzoogle really has everything you need to promote and sell your music, keep your fans and supporters informed, sell merch. They have EPK templates, crowdfunding templates, email and social features for connecting, and more. So yeah, visit bandzoogle.com and use promo code Robonzo, ROBONZO, to get 15% off your first year. And in other big news, I just released new merch in the Unstarving Musician shop, the relaunched Unstarving Musician shop, which is at unstarvingmusician.com/shop. It's a Halloween or Dia de Muertos seasonal merch. They're spooky mugs that feature the Unstarving Musician logo and something spooky in the form of a spider. You'll have to check it out. Just go check it out, even if you don't buy one. But if you're a caffeine head or you love tea, these mugs are great. They're the ceramic variety, the kind I use at home. I don't even have my own spooky mug yet, but I'm going to get one. So, okay, back to my conversation with Johnny. It was really good. I'm so happy I re-listened to it for this Rewind edited edition. We did have a few audio issues, but I meticulously went through and tried to make it sound really good for you, so I hope that won't distract you. Super great conversation. He is the real deal where blues guitar is concerned, and he's a damn good singer too. We really get into his history as a musician, his philosophy on blues, music, and the stage. We also talk about some of his international tour adventures and relationships with blues players in Chicago, Silicon Valley, and around the world. His performing with Pinetop Perkins, who was a legend. He's performed with a lot of blues legends. We talk about the Chicago Blues Festival and more, always more, right? You can find all things Johnny Burgin at johnnyburgin.com. Please enjoy this Rewind episode with me speaking to Johnny Burgin. Rockin' Johnny Burgin, welcome to the Unstarving Musicians podcast.
Good morning. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
Okay, excellent. And it's good afternoon for me. I forgot we're in fairly different time zones. I'm in the Eastern time zone now, but you were calling. How is your weather in lovely Petaluma, California, by the way?
It's kind of crisp and rainy at night and nice and pretty during the day. It's really nice.
That's good. That's good. You guys deserve it after the mess of fires that came through recently. So I wanted to start off by asking you to please tell me a story about coming up in the 90s in the Chicago blues scene and around Smoke Daddy.
Oh, great. Sure. Well, every day was like Christmas for me back then. There were so many people who were active, and I mean, so many blues artists that were active then that are now either retired or they've passed away. And they weren't playing big shows. They were just playing Tuesday at a little bar for $5, and they let you in free anyway, that kind of a thing. And you could sit right in front of the stage and watch their hands all night. And then people like Little Smokey, he'd play something and he'd look at me like, "Did you catch that?" He didn't say that, but you could just tell that. You could tell that he felt that way. So I had the best time. I went out every night pretty much.
How old were you during that time period?
I got to Chicago in '88, and I was 18 years old, and I was going to college. And by the time I was 20 or so, I was playing with some people, and we played on the West Side sometimes, and that's where I really got the bug, was playing in black clubs on the West Side for a black audience with black bands, and it was like a re-education because I was already studying the blues on my own. But then when you go out and see it in a live setting, it was completely different from the record. And that's when you realized, okay, now I've got to learn a whole different thing.
Wow, that must have been fun. Tell me a little more about how it was different from, you're obviously listening with a keen ear at this time, learning stuff, but tell me a little bit more about how it was different when you're in the live setting to experience it.
Well, people were sort of yelling at you. They were getting real involved with it. I mean, not yelling like scolding you, but they were, watching somebody play guitar was like watching a boxer, hit, watching him hit, "Oh, you like that? Bam! How about this? Bam, bam!" And, it was the phrasing that they had. And it just came to life. It like magically came to life, like a genie coming out of a bottle. And it was just really wild and exciting, and it was something I'd never seen before.
That's great. I never would have imagined that in the 90s, a young guy like yourself would have the experiences that you did, particularly with some of the people that you got to have them with. And I, admittedly, late in life, I always had an appreciation for the blues as a younger musician, but it was kind of more of a rock-tainted version of it. And then probably one of the more important moments for me in coming to appreciate it and kind of opening my mind, or there were actually two, and this one's going to sound maybe a little bogus because of who I mentioned, but Paul Rogers from Bad Company was doing a tour where he was just featuring the music of Muddy Waters and Jimi Hendrix.
He did a blues tour.
Yeah, and the night I saw him, they just focused on blues. But what really got me as a drummer was I was watching this guy play blues who really knew how to do it, and I was like, oh, it's a lot harder than I realized. And then the other thing was a documentary that I saw called, I believe it's called 10 Days Out, and I'm embarrassed to say I'm forgetting the young artist and his father's name, but one of the Jerry Harrison of the Talking Heads was one of the producers, but Pinetop Perkins and B.B. King and a lot of other people, not all of whom are with us, were featured in there, and that really opened my eyes a lot. And then being around San Jose, I don't know if you knew this, but I grew up. I spent 17 years in the South San Francisco Bay Area and San Jose, and so as you know, there's quite a blues scene around there, and
there's a good blues scene here.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. But anyway,
I'm 2 hours north of there, but I'm down in the South Bay all the time, and people really care about it there.
Yeah, they do, and I know that you hang with a lot of those guys, and in fact, I guess let me just jump to a related.
I didn't mean to get you off your track.
Not at all. Aki Kumar, I believe he actually pointed me in your direction, but you guys just got back from a nifty tour in Chile, right?
We did. We went to Chile, and earlier this year we went to Russia.
Wow.
We went to the UK, Sweden, and we played a big festival in France. We have a good little road show called West Coast Meets Chicago. And I would say out of everybody out here, Aki is the most Chicago-sounding guy out here. So we're really just playing Chicago, but it's still a West Coast Meets Chicago concept, and people really like it. And Chile was fun. The people were, it's a small blues audience down there, but they're just so happy you came, and they were just, we spanked them. I can't lie. It was nice.
That's great.
It was really nice. I can't wait to go back.
Did you guys by chance touch on, it sounds like you did not, but I'm just curious, did you touch on any of Aki Goes to Bollywood material, or was it more focused on the other?
Yeah, we played one or two of those because they're super bluesy.
Yeah.
I have no idea what he's singing, but I'm basically playing a Jimmy Reed style thing, or I'm playing something that it has a blues groove to it, and people love it. And people really loved it in Russia, because I didn't know this, but apparently during the Cold War, Russia did not close its doors culturally to India. They let in Indian movies, and people just, I think some people actually knew the songs he was singing, and they were just they would go to India for vacations. And there's just kind of a Russia-India connection that I didn't know about. And somebody had a big sign that said Russia and India brothers forever, from the Cold War era. So they were just fascinated with that. It was just catnip to them.
Wow. That's, surprised to me too. That's pretty cool. And when were you guys in Russia?
Last March.
That's cool.
I've been on the road. I've lived here for 13 months, and I've been on the road for 6 of those.
And did you find your way to the North San Francisco Bay directly from Chicago?
I did.
I don't think I gathered exactly what took you out there. What did take you to California?
Well, I kept touring out here, and I started playing with Aki back in 2013, and I kept touring, and it kept getting bigger and better. And there's a great blues scene. There's a few little key things that they're hungry for that it seemed like I had some of those things. So it was just a niche there. And finally I said, you know what, I'm going to just drive out there and stay next time. And so I did. I brought my drummer out, and we put everything in a Toyota Avalon, and we went through Des Moines, Nebraska, Salt Lake City, and then down to here, and I flew him back. So we got everything in that car and did those little one-nighters on the way out here, and it was a lot of fun. But really, sometimes it's time to expand into new markets, play new places, play for new fans, play with new people. That's what my new CD is all about. Neoprene Fedora.
Yeah, that's so cool. And speaking of Neoprene Fedora, so I before we started recording, I mentioned to you I grabbed 3 tunes off of there, the title track, Guitar King, and Teddy Bear. They all sound fantastic. Why don't we segue into that and tell me how
Tell us how it came together, and if you can, a little bit about the musicians that are on it and how that all came about.
Sure, this is just kind of a. I wanted to use all the colors of all the people here. Like everyone really, there's a lot of great musicians out here that have a real distinctive style, distinctive identity, and I wanted to use some of the best of those folks. So there's 16 musicians on the CD, and every song, or 12, I think, and every song has a different lineup, a different setup, and this just the whole recording has a lot of color. I did some Zydeco's on there. The title track is kind of a suite of songs where I did the surf thing, and then it goes into a burlesque thing, and then it goes into a like a Zydeco rock and roll thing, and then back to the surf thing. I just wanted to use all the different colors. Like, Bob Welch has a great rock and roll style. He plays on neoprene fedora. Kid Anderson did this really trippy, wild guitar. I wanted to get that. I wanted to get me and Aki's synergy with him on the chromatic for that Guitar King. And, Teddy Bear has a good sound to it. So I tried a lot of different stuff. I mean, this is my 7th CD, and this one is kind of like my own white album. In terms of the eclecticism.
Yeah.
For blues, it's eclectic. Blues is a conservative style of music, and people, when they listen to it, they want to hear, they want those payoffs in there, or they're not satisfied. So you got to I can't leave the blues audience alone because, it's their loyalty that's been sustaining me all this time. But I also want to do some different stuff.
Well, that sounds like a great way to do it. And was there any one in the Bay Area that was kind of the focal point to the connector, if you will, to getting you maybe, well, literally connected with all the musicians or most of the ones that ended up on the album?
Yeah, it was Aki and it was Kid Anderson.
Okay.
Kid has been so helpful to me. Like every time I'd come out here, I'd just go to Greaseland and he'd say, "Take an amp," because I'd be flying out here. I didn't have an amp, and he had a wall of amplifiers.
Yeah.
About 40 or 50 amps. He's just a big old teddy bear of a guy and a great engineer. And then Aki is really the guy who did it because when I quit music for about 8 or 9 years because I was working and my daughter had come along and I was working a regular job. And when I came back, I sort of had to build it back up brick by brick. So I started with, this is going to answer your question, Roberto. I started with just working around Chicago and working in all the collar counties of Chicago and building up an audience in the south suburbs and the west suburbs and kind of being like the best local band you can be, And then I kept pushing it out. And finally I'm like, I've got nothing going on in the San Francisco Bay at all. And I just started watching some bands on YouTube, and I saw this guy Aki. I'm like, this guy's kind of got it together, and he's got a good Chicago tone on his harmonica, and he's presenting himself well, and he looks like he's got his act together. So I just wrote him a letter, not a letter, but I friended him and wrote him on Facebook, and Aki goes around to Rick Estrin, who's with Rick Estrin and the Nightcats, and Rusty Zinn, a great guitarist out here, one of my favorites, and said, "Who is this guy, Rockin' Johnny?" And they're like, "Rockin' Johnny? He wants to come out here? Get his butt out here!" So, they all vouched for me because they knew me. Because Aki's, he's in a younger generation than me. Like when he started looking around at blues, I was on my hiatus. So he got me out here, and he was like best buddies with Kid, and he's like, "You got to record at Greaseland." So I tried it, and I went in there. I did my previous CD, Greetings from Greaseland. I did that in 5 hours, which is a personal best.
That's pretty amazing. How many tracks was that?
10.
Wow, that's amazing.
Which is next song. Maybe it was 11. I don't know. But I just gotten back from this tour of Japan, so I was really pumped up. And a lot of making good music is just managing yourself psychologically.
That's great. I haven't heard anybody say that yet, or in those words. That's great.
I knew I was setting myself up for a really good session because I had just done this tour and it was even better than I thought. I knew it would be a nice tour, and that's the kind of thing that makes you feel good is when you go to a new place and and really show them what you're all about, and people really like it, and you sell a lot of CDs and you make money. I mean, that's going to make most musicians I know pretty happy. That makes me really happy. So then when when you walk into the studio under those circumstances, it's amazing how what you can get accomplished.
Sure, that makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Timing is everything, as they say.
Yeah.
Are you the lead vocalist on Neoprene Fedora, by the way, for the most part?
Yes, I am. I did have some guests because I just wanted to use I wanted to employ their sounds. Aki did a couple. Alabama Mike is a fine singer who's getting out there a lot in recent years, and he has a real, like, one of my songs is such a soul song, and it was kind of a bittersweet song about leaving Chicago, and I just couldn't. I'm a good singer, but nobody can sing everything. You got to find the right. It's like a coat, it's going to look great on somebody, but maybe not you. so Alabama Mike had to sing that. It had his name on it. And who else sang? That's it for singers. But other than that, it was me.
That's great. And you didn't, throughout your 7 CDs, I think is what you mentioned, I think you had seen, you weren't always singing everything like you're capable of today. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, my first CD, I just wasn't ready. I mean, it's a good CD. This was on Delmark back in Chicago.
Did you sing on it?
This was part of the. I sang a few songs.
Okay.
And it was unanimously. I mean, the critics didn't just dislike it. I mean, they unanimously hated it. But so what? If some critics don't like you, I mean, it's not a big deal. But I mean, my singing it was no good until I hit 40. I had to get divorced. I had to get fired. I had to go through all the, I had to go through the rigor of normal, regular life. And when it doesn't work out, and I had to go through all that. And then my body just had to become 40 years old. My in order for me to sing. And then I came back, and I mean, I was always just singing because somebody had to do it. I was always booking, handling the bookings because somebody had to do it. I was always kind of taking one for the team and pushing it forward and being the leader because nobody else wanted to do it. So that meant I had to stand there and sing, even though my singing was terrible. And everything else about the band was popping, and we were at the right place at the right time, and that's how I got to be on Delmark, in a nutshell. But yeah, I was no blues singer, man.
So did any of you? I can see where you hit a certain point in life, certain things that happen. You hit a certain age, and your body's helping you out, your natural voice, but and obviously practice. Just the hours of putting it in. Did you ever do anything formally to between the time that you felt like you weren't really a great singer and the getting to where you are today?
Well, very recently, I took some lessons from Kid Anderson's wife.
Oh yeah,
Lisa. She's a wonderful singer.
I've been trying to get her on the show.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think she would be a great addition. She is a charming and very accomplished person, and she helped me. And all she did was teach me some warm ups. So when I'm driving to the gig, I just sing my vocal warm ups, and it made such a big difference. And so, it's so simple, but it made a big difference. And then I was able to relax my body more. And also, years and years of guitar playing, the guitar becomes more second nature.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I could probably play guitar through an earthquake, and it wouldn't even, I wouldn't miss a note because I've just been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
I've just, it just becomes like totally automatic, and that frees you up to relax your body and work on your singing. And I think the best thing is just relaxing yourself.
Yeah.
And the first time around in music, because my career was kind of in 2 parts. I was kind of like the hottest young Chicago.
I just lost you, Johnny, if you can hear me. Hang on just 1 second. And keep talking if you can.
Hello?
Hey, buddy. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I think it disconnected on my end and then just decided the internet would come back. So you were talking about being the young, hot guy in Chicago.
Yeah. And anyway, I was saying that my career kind of had 2 parts. But now I forgot. I was going somewhere with that. And I forget exactly where I was going.
That's all right. We were, I did want to ask you, and if the train of thought comes back, just feel free to switch gears rapidly. But
Okay.
I wanted to ask you. You mentioned it already, but about the long break that you took from playing, and you even mentioned a little bit of why that, what was going on, and what you were doing. But I think I wanted to know maybe a couple of things here. But one, what was the hardest part of doing that? Because I've had, for different reasons, have taken some time off, not quite that long, but have taken some time off, and it's always been really hard for me to get back into playing and performing. And I wanted to know what it was like for you to go from not playing that long and then coming back.
Well, it was nice to be, it was nice to be at home and, play with my daughter. That was great. But the thing about being a musician, it's kind of a totally involving thing. It involves it's your social life. They're your friends. I'm playing with my friends, and there's a bond there, because when people play together and it's really clicking, it's like you really love them. I mean, many people joke about being bros and that sort of thing, but there can be a true bond when people are united doing that, and that's what I missed, because you don't have that when you just go to work. This isn't a regular job.
Yeah.
And so I missed the whole social part of it.
Sure.
And I can't even really play like sitting around by myself. I need an audience. I mean, it all comes to life, with all the people.
Yeah, and what's funny, your answer was more like that of a career person, and I've always, maybe that's why it was so different for me. I was always a part-time player, and but for me, it was the times that I have had the break and then come back. It's an experience of frustration over the time of getting the chops back and feeling comfortable, and it seems to take longer than much longer than the break was. But
You mean sort of getting your music things back clicking again?
Yeah.
Well, the good thing about the blues is that people usually don't just do the blues for a few years and forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I came back, there were all these DJs that they still knew me. They still remember me. I mean, I had the advantage of being on Delmark back when Delmark would send out a whole lot of promos, and back when it was harder to make your own CD, and it was a big deal to be on a label, and labels were selling CDs. I was part of that world, and it was kind of a pre-social media business environment. This is like a niche music, but people stick with it, especially DJs, writers. Lots of times, I mean, clubs come and go, venues come and go,
Mm-hmm.
but some of the infrastructure kind of people that get your name out there, it's still around. So it wasn't hard for me to get started. It wasn't that hard. I did have to build it up brick by brick. I had to make a new website. I had to do things, but I started playing at Buddy Guy's again with one phone call. So, and I think some of it is, people really wanted to know. I mean, because I disappeared without a trace.
Yeah.
And people really they were really curious to see whether I could play again. So,
Sure.
But whatever, man. I mean, I got right back in and was playing a lot.
There are probably some of them anyway coming to see you on.
Well, I didn't even know and I didn't even know if I could play or not. I mean, I went, I got I had sold my gear and all this. I went and got a guitar. It's that Epiphone Sheridan that I use now. And I hired Billy Flynn because I really didn't know if I could sing and play all night or if I'd be able to do it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And my first gig back, that was in January of 2009. And so I had Billy Flynn. He's a great guitar player and singer. So I'm like, well, if I can't do it, somebody's got to do it. I'll just, collect the money at the end of the night. I mean, I still have to, a product has to be delivered. So anyway, it was fine. But there was this moment of kind of horrible silence before I played my first note. And then I started playing and I realized, oh, it's no problem. I can still play. Everything's going to be fine, man.
What's funny is you're describing something completely different scenario, but that moment that you just described about the fear and then everything's fine. I'm remembering Keith Richards' biography where he'd had the head injury, little accident at home, and he actually had a brain injury. And so when he went to do the first gig out again with the Stones, everyone was very nervous. Is everything going to click the way it should so we could play? But anyway, different circumstances, but you sounded like you were telling the same story there for a second.
Yeah, it was scary. I mean, it was definitely a scary note. And, I remember the first time I went to Spain, all of a sudden, and I was playing with a brand new band. I didn't know these fellas. And I guess I was probably a little jet lagged. And then there's that moment of silence before you first start, which is like kind of it's a golden moment. And all of a sudden my mind completely blanked and I couldn't have even told you my name. And I was just standing there in front of everybody. They're all looking at me, because sometimes you need something familiar to like jog your brain into, familiar pathways.
Yeah.
But somehow I managed to, I just came up with some song just popped into my mind and I started playing it and then everything was okay.
Thank goodness. Can you back up a second and tell me about that golden moment of silence? Kind of give me a little bit of a picture of what that means to you.
Sure, that's a nice question. My dad was an actor, and I'm really grateful for that. I spent summers with him, and he really believed in the discipline of the theater, and I saw the stage as a special place where something special can happen, and did happen, but it took work and concentration and teamwork and camaraderie, the stuff that I was missing so much when I quit. And so there's kind of a moment before you start playing when anything can happen and you're open to any idea and you don't have to do the same. I never like to do really the same show that much, and I never, I'm pretty spontaneous and I never play the same guitar solos. I'm kind of living on the edge a little bit on stage, and
I love that.
There's this moment where all the possibilities are sort of right there in front of you, and everyone is gathered together, and people are sort of doing an ancient thing. I mean, theater is the oldest art form, and music is. I mean, it's a primal old art form, and when people gather together to hear music, and there's this silence, then the rest of the world and the rest of the day-to-day cares don't exist anymore for anyone, and that's the goal, and everyone is free of it, and then we're just like human beings together.
Yeah, I love that.
That's what keeps me going.
Yeah, I understand it.
I mean, that's why musicians shouldn't have their cell phones on stage. You don't want an intrusion and that's why musicians shouldn't look like their wife just sent them to Costco.
Yeah. Because
the stage is a special place, and it should be treated as such. And when you walk on stage, you got to forget about that other stuff. That's like the biggest demand of being a musician. And then you're really giving and sharing something.
Yeah, absolutely. So perfect time for me to ask this because I was trying to figure out how it was not going to be too random, but I love the fact that having interviewed, so this is going to be episode 30 or 31 as we discussed before we started recording, but not all of my guests have a great selection of photos that I can even ask if it's okay to use, and you do, and I'm curious to ask you, has photography been one of the elements that's important to you to put together your total package, or has it been a little bit of you've been fortunate to be important to photographers and that has helped too?
I guess there's always been people who wanted to shoot me. So, I mean, when I first went to Europe, I was on the cover of this magazine, Rolling and Tumbling. I mean, I don't know, but it's a tough marketplace out there now. Because everyone has a CD, everyone has a recording, everyone has a band, everyone's doing it. And, for a lot of buyers, they just see all this stuff and there's no way to differentiate yourself. And coming out to California, I think people here are just a little more. They're pretty professionally minded, and they're good at they're good at marketing themselves, and moving across the country is a good way to start adopting all kinds of best practices and new practices and new ways. It's a good way to step up your game.
Yeah, maybe you were leading by example too.
I think I was following their good examples.
That's great. It sounds like your relationship with Delmark, established some time ago, was largely that they loved you. You're obviously a really nice guy and talented, so the relationship was easy to get going. Can you talk a little bit about, because you also mentioned back then labels did, these kind of things. Can you talk about how the work relationship has changed over the years? Because it is a completely different business than when you first started with them.
Sure. Well, no one really needs a label that much anymore. I mean, if you've got Billy Branch and John Primer, these are guys kind of at the top of the blues field in terms of their seniority, their experience, what they've done. And when you look at the field, there's no one really equaling them. If they're putting out their own CDs, what does that tell you? Nobody's really buying stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They can't sell enough CDs to make their payrolls and pay for their promotions and pay what they used to pay for artists and all of that. So now you kind of got to do it. You got to do it on your own, or you don't have to do it on your own. It's still good to have a label, because if there's 20 guys and only 40 of them have a label, they're still going to spend some money on advertising, and there's kind of an advantage there. But all right, I made 3 Delmarks under my own name and many as a sideman. So I'll always be a Delmark recording artist. Now I'm free to make a higher profit margin by making my own CD.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I saw that you are using CD Baby. I just recently I follow, because of the nature of the podcast, I follow some educational Facebook groups, and just in the last week, a guy had asked about the different channels or publishers for helping you get your music onto the different digital services, and I'm sure, and the conversation of physical product came up, and CD Baby, of course, is one of many mentioned. Can you talk about, just kind of for my edification there, I know some things about them and have used them with some other artists I've worked with, but what are the things that you like or dislike about it, or what can you share about your experience with them?
Well, it's a big convenience, because if someone buys your CD from Australia, you don't have to, and you're touring and you're driving from Omaha to Salt Lake City, then you don't have to stop at some post office and mail them their CD, So they provide a good service. I'm still, I'm looking around for the best ways to maximize this stuff too. I just do so many gigs. I sell most of my CDs off the bandstand, and it really makes a difference financially.
Oh, that's good.
So, yeah. And here in Silicon Valley, there's places that are better and places that are worse for selling CDs, Silicon Valley is not a great place for CDs. So Silicon Valley is kind of like the future's already here, But when you're in Kansas or something, or when you're in a theater in Wisconsin, you're going to sell a lot of CDs. And the main thing is just when it comes to merchandising, it's just the more of a cover, the more cover people pay, the happier they are to buy your merchandise.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's absolutely true, because they just paid $20 to see you at Biscuits and Blues or at some theater, or $15 or something. Then their brain is already telling them, these guys must be great because I just paid to see them, So the real key is to try to find ticketed events where people pay a cover, and then your merchandise sales will go up too. So like they say, nothing succeeds but like success. But we live in a different world. I kind of feel like the whole thing all blew up, and all the pieces went up in the air, and they still haven't fallen down yet. I've been saying that for years.
Yeah, that's a fact, I think. I'm going to have a guy on the podcast. I'm actually supposed to interview him tomorrow, but he runs a Facebook group, and he does workshops for entrepreneurial musicians, or just frankly musicians that are trying to make it. And
I should go to one.
Yeah, I'll pass on his name, but he looks at the industry or the music business completely differently than those who are, they remember maybe a little bit about how it was when you started or before you started.
Oh
And
man, it was all calling people on the phone,
yeah.
and it was all like putting up flyers. And I still do this. I had these I had these little cards with all my gigs, and I
Mm-hmm.
give out my cards, and that just shows people you're playing a lot, and it gives them a physical reminder. But back then it was all like shoe leather.
Well, I'll put his in the show notes. I'll put his Facebook group there and his name. And unfortunately, may have to reschedule our interview because of a scheduled power outage in my area. But anyway, we'll see what happens. But yeah,
Well,
I'd be curious to know what your feedback is when you just have a peek into the group and learn what he's doing. Given that you're still you're working in an evolving business and kind of curious what people might know that you would benefit from. So.
yeah, and the other thing is, I have to say, I really appreciate the focus of your show, that it's kind of on today's business practices as a musician. I mean, I can tell you what I do. That's about it. But I do manage to get by. But I just, it's interesting to see how people are doing it, because every artist is a little bit different, and there's so many ways to approach this.
Yeah, and I've had, some of the artists I've had on are pretty darn young, so they're, they're born into the social media world and the ways of figuring out what to do now. But surprisingly, I had one of these gals who's in Nashville. She's a singer-songwriter in the country scene, and she surprised me by saying that despite all the discouragement to do so, she makes physical CDs, takes them to the shows, and sells a lot of them.
Well, people want to buy something that they can hold, and they what they want to do is like spend like 2 seconds with you and tell you like, "Hey, man, I really liked your show," and like, that's a transaction, so they should pay for that by buying a CD. And maybe
Yeah.
they shouldn't, but I mean, that might sound kind of entitled, but I mean, it's kind of a means for people to do that, even if they don't even have a CD player because they have a new car or something. They'll buy something.
Yeah, well, I'm remembering, a time that I was living in Dallas, Fort Worth, and I went to see Doyle Bramall Sr. play in a
Mhm.
small place, and I was really into what he was doing at the time, and I walked up, I bought a CD, and he, signed it and talked to me for a few minutes, and it's just like, you never forget that as a fan. Never forget that
Right,
kind
and
of
I
stuff.
enjoy doing that for people, because the blues fans are loyal. They really care. The same fans were there after I left for 9 years. I mean, do you think that would happen if I was playing pop music or rap or something? I don't know. Maybe I'm hating on them. I'm not trying to, but I mean, they they really appreciate those personal interactions, and so do I. I mean, I got to play with Lazy Lester. I mean, I was just thrilled to meet him.
Yeah.
Much to play with him. I mean, I'm a fan as well.
Yeah, and to answer the question, who knows about if you were playing some other genre, but certainly the relationships that you built with your audiences and the product that you were putting out, the memory you sort of left helped a lot, a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a long term thing, and it's all built on relationships.
yeah, no doubt. I gathered that you did some touring with Pinetop Perkins. Is that accurate?
I did. Yeah.
Can you share a story about that? And I ask because he was someone I didn't really know much about until I had seen the aforementioned documentary, and he's an interesting guy to see and talented. But yeah, can you share a story?
Some of them are. I mean, I remember some great conversations in the van, but I don't know that they bear repeating in this form. Dave Myers was there. I mean, he was the bassist for Little Walter, and he was one of the first electric bassists in Chicago when the bass came out. And
Wow.
before that, he played it all Little Walter stuff and the old Ginger Wells stuff. It was Dave and Lewis Myers, and so some of the conversations they had were fantastic because they were both known each other for 40, 50 years. But Pine Top he didn't really say a lot, and
I just lost you again. Hold on.
hello,
Hey, buddy.
sorry, man.
No, I think it's something going on my end because I'll suddenly lose connection. Anyway, don't apologize. So we were talking about Pinetop.
Yeah, yeah, it was just fun. I mean, but yeah, he didn't say that much, and he just went out and played. But he still loved to play. He was in his 70s then, and I was in my early 20s. He loved to play, and he was getting he was packing the place and getting paid well, or I think he was happy about it. And, it was a great experience for me.
I can't imagine. That must have been great. Must have been great.
Yeah.
And the Chicago Blues Festival, you were a mainstay there for a while, yes? Maybe still are?
Yeah, I've played there many, many times. I played there 3 times last summer.
Wow.
All as a sideman. I played with Eddie Taylor Jr. I played with Mary Lane, who's a great blues singer. And I played with Tail Dragger. But these are all relationships that I've had since my 20s. So it's just maintaining good relationships. And eventually, they come in handy. I mean, I started as a sideman. I didn't just walk in and announce to the world, like, here I am, Rockin' Johnny, get out of my way now. It wasn't like that. I mean, it was very slowly and gradually, and I was playing in other people's bands, and I was helping people. I mean, when you play for somebody else, I mean, your job is just to make them look good, make them sound good. And so I learned how to do all that, and I still do it. And now years later, I mean, back when I was playing with Tail Dragger, that was like the worst gig in town. Nobody went, well, I mean, because it was a very long gig in a what some people thought was a dangerous neighborhood for very little money, and I was thrilled to do it. And Tail Dragger, he was just one of many blues singers back then, and now he's like one of the best guys out there. And he's such a great showman. I mean, it used to be kind of common. There were a lot of great singers running around, and now that it's 20 years can change. Things change a lot in 20 years.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you answered my question. It was really about, like, how did you find yourself in the festival circuit there? But it sounds like it's just the classic answer still works today: relationships, and I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, and really the only way to break into the Chicago scene if you're a young player, is you've really got to play with someone who's more established and just go play the clubs that way, like whether it was Jimmy Burns and various people I played with, Sam Lay, great blues drummer. You've got to go in with these guys, and then that's like a big public vote of confidence, and then after a few years, maybe you can do your own thing there. And so it's slow and gradual, and I think it is harder for younger people now, but because there's less options, but you can still do it.
I'm happy to hear you say that. Johnny, it's been wonderful talking with you. I'm pretty sure I've seen you play before, possibly with a drummer named George Brandau, and I don't know if that has ever happened, but I'm trying to remember where. But at any rate, I hope to see you play live again sometime soon, perhaps when I'm visiting the Bay Area, or who knows, you're all over the place, so hopefully that happens.
I think I should come to Panama.
I think you should too. I'm definitely gonna. I threw Aki's name at one of the talent recruiters. I'll give you a little secret here, and for those of you listening, I learned recently that the person who does I cannot remember her last name right now, but I can get that to you. But a lot of the players that come from there are from the legendary Blues Cruise. For what that's worth, knowing that would be good. But I'm definitely going to throw your name out to them. I think you would be a wonderful addition to the Boquete Jazz and Blues Festival in Panama. And yeah, man, I hope to see you real soon. So thanks again for coming on the show.
Roberto, you're a hero.
Thank you very much.
This episode was powered by Podcast Startup. If you feel you need a little help with that podcast you're contemplating, Podcast Startup may be just the thing for you. Podcast Startup is a program designed for new podcasters. Did you know that most podcasts don't make it past their first few episodes? That's right. They start, they stall, and then they die. Sustaining a podcast ain't easy. It's commitment. A lack of planning and misaligned expectations are a recipe for fast burnout and fade out for podcasters. This is exactly the kind of thing that Podcast Startup was designed to help you with. If you're intrigued, if you want to start a podcast the right way, go to unstarvingmusician.com/podcast startup to learn more and to receive free podcast startup tips from yours truly. Thank you for listening. You can leave us feedback, questions, comments, complaints at unstarvingmusician.com/feedback. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. If you love this podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn about the many ways of showing your love and support. Your support does indeed equal love. The series music you heard in this episode is New Gods Part 2 by yours truly. Find links for all the places to hear the full version with vocals by yours truly at robonzo.com. If you do not yet have a website for your music, check out Bandzoogle. It was created to help musicians and bands build their website and manage direct-to-fan marketing and sales. Bandzoogle has amazing design options, a commission-free store to sell music, merch, tickets, and more, plus tools that can capture detailed fan data for you. Try it at bandzoogle.com. Use the promo code ROBONZO, that's ROBONZO, to get 15% off your first year. Find links for all the people and things talked about in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com. Peace, love, and a whole lot of gratitude.